right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so just some virtual norms and reminders before we get started. And again, hopefully I don't really have to go over these, but I will very quickly. Just respect, use the mute button when you are listening and unmute to speak. Hopefully you can find a quiet space to be so you can concentrate. And kindness, use kind words with others in the chat and in the discussion. Engagement, if you can keep your camera on, great, but I will let you decide if you want it on or off. Open and monitor the chat just so you can see what people are saying. Enter your questions and comments into the chat box. We do have Michelle Wagner, who is on the back channel, who will be watching for all of that stuff. And then patience, again, you know, we sometimes have some technical difficulties when we're doing these types of things, and we just ask you to be patient if we do. My name is Cindy Cook. I'm a school health consultant at Wayne Risa, and there's my email address and my phone number if you need to get a hold of me. You can reach out to me if you would like some sessions of SEL done at your school for your staff. And so please feel free to reach out. I am funded to do a lot of this work through Medicaid dollars. And so this is just my little spiel that I have. If you have some kids that are not insured or families that are not insured, please let them know that we have 2 programs available in the state of Michigan to help out with insurance. And the first one is Healthy Kids. This is for Medicaid eligible families. And it can go back 3 months prior to the application to cover expenses. And there's no monthly premiums. My child is health and dental care for children under 18 and under. And families can earn between 150 and 200% of the poverty level. Again, their income is too high for Healthy Kids, and they cannot afford other insurance, and the cost is $10 per month, regardless of the number of dependents. Both of them are administered by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And so you just have to fill out one application, and they determine which program the family qualifies for. And you can actually have some pretty high annual income with both of these programs. So if you know families that don't have insurance, please let them know that these are available. And if you need any other information on it, there's a brochure in your tiny URL. Turn your cameras off if you would, P. We're going to do a little opening activity. So if you'll turn off your cameras, and I can't really see you anyway, so get comfortable in your seat or your chair. Close your eyes or focus on something that you want to focus on. And the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to unclench your jaw. We have a tendency to carry a lot of stress in our jaws. This is the end of the day. And so just unclench your jaw. Relax and drop your shoulders. Relax and drop your shoulders, because we carry a lot of stress and tension too in our shoulders. And then just take a few deep breaths. You want to inhale maybe to a count of 4. Hold it. And exhale to a count of 4. And just do that again. Inhale. Hold it. And exhale. And that's just kind of a relaxation technique that you can utilize within your classroom. Again, whether you're virtual or in person. So thank you for doing that. Let's get started. In case no one's told you today, you're doing a great job. You're doing the best that you can with what you have. And you know, we're all doing the best that we can at this point. So you're doing a great job. By the end of the session today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the whole school, whole community, whole child model real quick. We're going to look at CASEL's old and new model. There's not a lot of differences in there, but we're going to just look at the old and new model and compare the two. Why social emotional health is important to all school stakeholders, not just you as teachers or administrators, but to everybody in the school. Explain the importance of relationship building, and then we'll describe some SEL strategies. And if we have time at the end, we'll practice some compassion. So those are the objectives for today. So this is thinking about the whole child in social emotional learning. And again, this comes out of, whoops. And let me see if I can just do this real quick here. The Science of Learning and Developmental Alliance, 2021. And it says a deep focus on building strong relationships, fostering a sense of belonging, and attending to the social, emotional, and cognitive development is not in conflict with efforts to accelerate academic learning. These strategies are mutually dependent and reinforcing. We have been doing social emotional learning in the schools forever. We just have a title for it now, social emotional learning. And, but again, we've been doing this forever, all right? And we just have to be a little bit more intentional these days about it. This is A Nation at Hope. This is also in your tiny URL. So please make sure that you take a look at it. It is a little bit of a long document, but again, here are some quotes that I took from it. It says there's a remarkable confluence of experience and science on one point. Children learn best when we treat them as human beings with social, emotional, as well as academic needs. The promotion of social, emotional, and academic learning is not a shifting educational fad. It is the substance of education itself. It's not a distraction from the real work of math and English instruction. It's how instruction can succeed. All right, so some of you may be old enough that you remember A Nation at Risk, which again brought in a lot of changes in the educational world because of that report. This is A Nation at Hope, you know, looking at social emotional learning and what this can add. Again, A Nation at Hope, educating the whole learner cannot be reduced to a simple set of policies or proposals. It is instead a mindset that should inform the entire educational enterprise. So again, we have to think about the whole child from the time they're little until the time they get to be young adults. And we have to take care of that social, emotional, cognitive, character, physical, and academic piece. And so here we have the whole child model. Again, just a brief history. This used to be called the Coordinated School Health Model. This comes from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. In 2007, the ASCD introduced the Whole Child Initiative. And in 2014, the CDC and the ASCD collaborated to develop the WISC model. And so this is the WISC model. The blue components that you see were contributed by the CDC. That is the Coordinated School Health. It used to be 8 components. Now there's 10 components because we separated physical environment and social emotional climate, and we separated family engagement from community involvement because those are 2 very different things. On the inside, you'll see what was contributed by the ASCD. All right. And so if we have these 10 components really robust and working in our schools, then our kids are going to be healthy, safe, supported, engaged, and challenged. All right. Also, these 10 components are supposed to talk to each other in schools. We're not supposed to work in silos like we very often do. And when we talk, what we do is we see that we start communicating and we start building this safety net for kids. And what we do then, you know, in building the safety net is we have fewer kids falling through the cracks. All right. So that's a little bit on the 10 components. And again, here's the whole child tenets: healthy, safe, supported, engaged, and challenged. And they follow very nicely, or they're actually lined up almost exactly, because they're based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see that, again, kids have to be healthy, their physiological needs need to be taken care of, their safety needs need to be taken care of, their love and belongingness needs need to be taken care of, and then we can engage and challenge them. So that's a basic, and let me just say that we have integrated the whole child into Michigan's integrated continuous improvement process. And you can see down here, here's the child in the center, just like in the whole child model, and you have the whole community, whole school, whole community, whole child model here. And again, these are the same types of things that we do with the whole child models. We evaluate, we assess needs, we plan, we implement, we monitor, and we evaluate. So again, Michigan has taken this very seriously and has adopted the WISC model, what we very often call it, and incorporated into the MyKIP process. Any questions on the WISC model? And you can unmute yourself, or I can look in the chat. All right. All right, so let's get on to social emotional learning then. In teaching, this is one of my favorite quotes: you can't do the Bloom stuff until you take care of the Maslow stuff. All right, so until we take care of that triangle of Maslow, taking care of their basic needs, their safety needs, their love and belongingness needs, you know, kids aren't going to learn very well in school if we don't take care of those basic needs. In teaching, again, another one of my favorite quotes, if you've seen this before: if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we, what? Do we teach or punish? And why can't we finish the last statement as automatically as we do the others? All right. So again, when we talk about social emotional behavior, we're zooming in here, and what we want to do is take these moments to teach and not to punish kids, because sometimes they don't know the proper way to behave, or the things that we're looking for them in the classroom. Again, social emotional learning is not just a program. You know, this isn't just a one semester or, you know, course that we do. And it's not just one more thing that gets taught. It should be incorporated into everything we're doing on campus. Why? Emotions matter for attention, memory, and learning. They matter for decision making. They matter for relationships. They matter for health and well-being, and they matter for performance. So emotions and learning go hand in hand. Motivation, all of that stuff. And so here's the, here's the old model that you're looking at now. And if you look at the top, it says classroom, schools, home, and communities. All right. And here are the 5 competencies that come from CASEL, which is the Collaborative Academic Social Emotional Learning. And here you have self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And those are your 5 competencies. All right. And then you can see at the bottom, it says, you know, in the classroom, it's the SEL curriculum and instruction. So one of the questions I have to ask you now is, do you have a social emotional learning curriculum? If you don't, please contact me, because one of my jobs also is to promote the implementation of the Michigan Model for Health, which has always had social emotional learning as a part of it. People are kind of thinking that social emotional learning is somehow this standalone topic, and it's not. It's always been in health education from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so if you're interested in looking at curriculum, please get a hold of me. The next slide shows the new CASEL model. And again, not a whole lot of it's changed, but what they've done on the outside circles at the top is they've separated family and caregivers as one and communities. The same way we did in the whole child model, families and caregivers are very different than from what goes on in the community in some instances. And so we want to try to find out how we can incorporate our community into our schools also. You know, are you looking at, I don't know, social workers, counselors, and psychs? You know, maybe you have those in your school, maybe you don't. And I forgot what I was going to say about them, but I'm going to go right on. And I apologize. Sorry about that. Looking at the bottom, you see SEL instruction classroom, and then you see school-wide culture, practices, and policies. All right. And again, this goes along very well with the whole school, whole community, whole child model. Then you see authentic partnerships, again, with family and caregivers. And then you see aligned learning opportunities in the community. So what types, I guess what I was saying about social workers and psychs and that sort of thing is if you don't have them in your school, who are you reaching out to in your community that may be able to help you provide those services? So it came back to me. Also in this area, it says implementation focus areas for social emotional learning. And please don't think that you're going to be able to accomplish all of this in 1 year. Usually when we're talking about social emotional learning and systems change, we look to 3 to 5 years for implementation. So again, you can look at some of these ideas and you can implement maybe 1 or 2 of these ideas this year, but it's going to take you a number of years to fully implement a good social emotional learning curriculum, policies and practices. Again, those partnerships with families. It's going to take some time to do that. So don't try to finish this all in 1 year. We want to strengthen adult SEL competencies and capacity, and we'll talk about that today. Then we want to promote SEL for students, and we want to reflect on our data for continuous improvement. And over here on the other side, it shows you what some of the short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals are, or student outcomes. And you can see that when we implement social emotional learning in all of these areas, these concentric circles out here, all right, we have improved attitudes about self, others, and tasks. Perceived classroom and school climate is better. Positive social behaviors and relationships, academic success, fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, less drug use. And then here are the long-term goals: high school graduation, college and career readiness, safe sexual behaviors, healthy relationships, good mental health, reducing criminal behavior, and civic engagement. So again, if we can incorporate or implement a really robust social emotional learning, you know, in the classrooms throughout the school, our families and caregivers understand it, our communities understand it, we can be sending consistent messages to kids. So these are the 5 core competencies. Self-awareness. And again, just take a look at this, recognizing one's own feelings, interests, strengths, and limitations, identifying emotions. These are competencies that can be taught in the classroom, all right? So that kids can identify their emotions, so they can have an accurate self-perception as far as what their strengths and weaknesses are. The second one is self-management, how to regulate emotions. Because again, remember, emotions are related to everything, our relationships, our learning experience, all of those sorts of things. So they have to learn how to regulate and manage those daily stressors that, you know, kids perceive in the classroom. So again, impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, and organizational skills. Social awareness, taking perspective of others and appreciating similarities and differences. So perspective taking, again, we need to work on this in today's environment, that we want to, can we talk about things when we have different perspectives? Empathy has to be taught. It's not one of those emotions that we're born with. So kids have to understand and appreciate what it's like we're walking in the shoes of another person. And then respect for others. And again, racial differences, religious differences, any of those differences, coming together and understanding and appreciating that diversity. Then we have relationship skills, communication. We communicate a lot through our phones these days, and so do kids. All right. Social engagement. Our kids came back from a pandemic and were really suffering with how to socially engage with their peers, with their teachers, and so on and so forth. And we saw, some behaviors that were not quite on track with what we'd like to see. Relationship building and then teamwork. Okay, so we want to practice those relationship skills also within the school setting. And then the last one is responsible decision making, which is basically a decision making process. You identify the problem, analyze the situation, come up with some possible solutions. You pick one of those possible solutions and follow through with it, and then you evaluate and reflect on it. And ethical responsibility, there's in the Michigan model, we do when and whys as our decision-making processes, and they have 5 questions to ask the kids that focus on ethical responsibility. Any questions on the 5 core competencies? All right. Give it a little bit of wait time there. All right, so proactive chat. In the chat, if you would, I want you to think about a teacher who had a great impact on your learning. Okay, think about a teacher who had a great impact on your learning. You're going to do this in the chat. Name the teacher if you can. Most of us remember that teacher and we remember their names. Identify a characteristic or 2 that allowed them to have such an impact on you. Identify a characteristic or 2 that allowed them to have such an impact. And then what social emotional skills did they exhibit that made you want to learn? So I want you to think about a couple of characteristics, and then I want you to go to those 5 competencies and say, which of those 5 competencies did they exhibit that made you want to learn and be involved and engaged in that class? So if you would do that in the chat, I'd appreciate it. And I'm going to open up the chat here. Think about a teacher who had a great impact on your learning. Name them if you can. Identify a characteristic or 2 that allowed them to have an impact, and what social emotional skills did they exhibit that made you want to learn. And I know all of that may take you a couple of seconds, so I'm going to give you just a few minutes to enter that in the chat. I'm not seeing anything yet. I know we have a small number of participants, but okay. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. What characteristics did she have? Why did you want to learn from Mrs. Jones? All right. Thank you, Allison. Her name was Mrs. Kelly. She was also my coach. She was always willing to listen to me, which is a skill, and build strong relationships with me. Appreciating diversity. Thank you. Mrs. Smith always took the time to smile and ask about my day. He was kind and caring. Thank you, Michelle. Social emotional skills, relationship skills, good. Dr. Holloway, ELA teacher, she gave us daily affirmations. Yeah, something just as simple as that. All right. So again, think of those teachers that had an impact on you, what types of things they did within their classroom that made you want to learn, and bring those into your classroom as well, because a lot of those things make a difference. Thank you. Dr. Mr. Shipper, social awareness and relationship skills. Thank you. So thank you for participating in that. I appreciate it. And let's move on to the next slide. And again, here it says the pandemic. This comes from, again, 2021. It says the pandemic has made me realize that unless we find ways to focus on students as people and engage them as people and make the work we're doing with it important to them, where they are now, everything is for nothing. We have to start with them as people. And so we have to remember that kids are young, they're inexperienced, they don't have the knowledge that we do, they sometimes don't have the behaviors that we would like them to have. And so it's our responsibility to try to teach them. All right. Teachers need to establish positive relationship with students in order to manage classrooms effectively. So again, people I've been in, I don't know how many professional development types of things just like this. And the one thing that it always comes down to is relationships, relationships, relationships. The relationships you have with your administrators, with your colleagues, with your students, with your families, and with the community members. All right. We need to establish positive relationships. It's all about relationships may seem to be an overused maxim, but that doesn't make it any less valid. All right. So you hear, maybe you've heard this in professional development also, that it's about relationships, relationships, relationships. Well, we need to talk about how we build relationships then. I'm going to go into a little bit of trauma here, just very quickly, because it says, again, considerable research has revealed that resilience results from positive social relationships, positive attitudes and emotions, and the ability to control one's own behaviors and feelings of competence. Do we always see this? No. Okay, students who have experienced traumatic events may exhibit some of the following signs. And you can see the student with all of this stuff on their back, and they're struggling, obviously. So they have difficulty in self-regulation. They have negative thinking sometimes. They stay on high alert. We're going to talk about that fight, flight, or freeze. Difficulty trusting adults because they may not have a trusted adult in their life. And they may have inappropriate social interactions. And so this is the type of thing that you see in your classroom. Excuse me. And it says behaviors communicate everything. So when you see a kid misbehaving or acting inappropriate, we have to remember that they're sometimes in flight, fight, or freeze. And so in the classroom, in the classroom, for flight, you might see withdrawal, climbing underneath the desk, okay, fleeing the classroom, skipping class, daydreaming, seeming to sleep, avoiding others, hiding or wandering, becoming disengaged, okay, so that's that flight. And then we have the fight where they act out, behave aggressively, act silly. Again, sometimes the class comedian gets that positive reinforcement. exhibiting defiance, being hyperactive, arguing, screaming, yelling, throwing things, that sort of thing. And then freeze is that exhibiting numbness, refusing to answer, refusing to get their needs met, giving a blank look, or feeling unable to move or act. Now, one thing that we know is that when kids are in fight, flight, or freeze, they're in their amygdalas, okay? And they're not in their frontal cortex. So this is one of the things that I bring, that this is from Dr. Bruce Perry. And this is a strategy that you can use to deal with kids that are dysregulated. Very often we start at the top and we want to reason with the kid first. And that's the wrong approach, according to Dr. Perry. The first thing we need to do is to get kids to regulate. All right, because if they're dysregulated, they're in their amygdala and they're not in their frontal cortex. All right, so the first thing we have to do is regulate a child. Second thing is we have to relate to them, that relationship building. How do we relate to this child? And then once we relate to the child, then we can reason with them. Then we can talk to them and say, what's going on? And again, not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you to make you behave this way. All right, so again, regulate. We got to regulate them first, relate to them second, and reason with them third. And we don't start with reasoning, because if they're dysregulated, they're not going to hear anything you say because they're back in their amygdala. So establishing, maintaining, and restoring relationships. Establishing relationships. Greet students daily or hourly if rotating classes. This is probably one of the biggest things that you can do, is greet your students at the door. Even if it's the first day of class, ask them their names and welcome them into the classroom. Do that again. If you're at an elementary school, that's going to be a little bit easier. If you're at a middle school or secondary, high school, something like that, and they're changing classes, doing it hourly. Again, it may take a little bit of time in the beginning, but I'm a true believer that you can spend some time in the beginning of the class, at the beginning of the year, to work on social emotional skills and relationship building before you even start the academics. Promote collaboration through teaming. And again, kids do not necessarily know how to work in teams. We have to teach them. So starting with pairs, all right, and have the kids, because some kids don't like sharing in a large group. I'm one of them. I'll kind of sit back. Once we get into a smaller group, I have a tendency to share a little bit more. Kids are the same way. So start them in pairs and give them different pairs of people to work with, so that they can, again, appreciate that the differences between different partners. All right. And then get them into fours. And you probably don't want your teams much bigger than 4 or 6. But again, teach them by doing it small first and teaching them how to collaborate with a partner before they get into 4s. Utilizing student interest surveys to find out what their interests or where their interests lie, and how you can get to know this kid a little bit better. Not just knowing what they do in your classroom, but what are their interests outside of the classroom. And then write notes to students. This can be as simple as a sticky note attached to their desk, telling them something, I'm so glad that I saw you writing in your journal today, without even being prompted, something like to that effect. But sometimes kids really value that kind of stuff and take it home to their parents and say, look, I did something good in school today. So establish relationships. Maintain relationships. Utilize the 2 times 10 strategy. This is just a strategy where you pick a student maybe that you don't have a relationship with yet, and you check in with them for 2 minutes, 10 days in a row. 2 minutes, 10 days in a row, just to get to know them better. All right. Community circles or Monday meetings. A lot of schools now are going to Monday meetings or the community circle type of thing where kids have a talking piece and everybody has an opportunity to share, and you can ask them different questions. And of course, those questions can be a little bit less serious in the beginning. You know, what's their favorite color, their favorite animal, you know, stuff like that. And then we get into deeper conversations as they begin to trust each other. Host lunch bunches, you know, maybe in your classroom where you invite certain kids to lunch and have an opportunity again to meet with them in a non-academic setting. And then attend student events whenever possible. You know, kids love when you attend an event and you say the next day, hey, Jimmy, I was at your soccer game last night and I saw you score the goal. You did a great job. I was really impressed. Boom. And then restore relationships. Modeling, take responsibility and make amends. My last teaching assignment was down in Georgia, and I was teaching physical education at the time, which I hadn't taught in a long time. And I had a shortage of equipment and stuff like that. So whatever we had to maintain. Well, I had one kid that put a ball up underneath his shirt or something and wouldn't give me the ball. And of course, I probably lost my temper and said something inappropriate that I shouldn't have said. The next day, he came to class again and he came up to me and he goes, Miss Cook, I want to say I'm sorry. And I said, you know what? I want to say I'm sorry too. And boom, we had a relationship from then on because it was a mutual respect, because we both took responsibility and made amends. Those are the type of restorative conversations you can have with kids too. Avoid holding mistakes over students. We all make mistakes. We all learn from our mistakes, hopefully. So don't hold those mistakes over a student's head. And then face up, fix up, and follow up. Kind of like what I said, you know, face up. Yes, I said some inappropriate things. Fix up, I apologize, and follow up with the kid the next day or a couple days after or whatever. But those are ways to restore relationships. And so again, the practicing building relationships is critical. No significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. And so again, if you want to see kids excel within your classroom and do well on your standardized tests and all of that, you have to learn to build relationships with each and every kid. So this is relationships times 3. Number 1, get to know your students. Allow your students to get to know you on a more personal level, and allow students to get to know one another. And when you have those 3 things in place, then you have a community of learners. Okay, they feel safe, they're healthy, safe, supported by you, and so they can be engaged and challenged. And we go right back to that whole child model. Sometimes the pressure to stick to the curriculum and the lack of time available to work on relationship building can rob us of opportunities to get to know our students. And so that's the growth mindset playbook. And again, we have to build those relationships. I can't stress the importance of it. I had a teacher one time, you know, I said, because there's always that one kid that you can't find anything good about them. All right. And I had a teacher one day in class, you know, in one of my PD sessions, and she says, I can't find anything good about this kid. And I said, well, think about it. So she thought about it for a minute and she said, he's got a really nice head of hair. I said, go with it. And start there to start developing a relationship with that child. Tell him he's got a nice head of hair. You know, that may be the first time he's heard that, or the first time that he's heard that from you, taking an interest in him. And that might be the, you know, the icebreaker to start developing that relationship. Of course, we have to start with adult social and emotional learning and then work on the kids' social and emotional learning. And that's a 4th grade teacher from Seattle. And so why do we want to work on adult competency and learning? Number 1, adults who have the ability to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate emotions are more likely to demonstrate patience, empathy, and encourage healthy communication and create safe learning environments. Again, we go right back to that whole child model. Emotional skills of teachers influences student conduct, engagement, attachment to school, and academic performance. So how you deal with your emotions, because kids they know when you're upset, they know when you're not feeling well, they know when you're down, all of those sorts of things. So again, how you handle those emotions in a professional setting are going to influence your students. And this attachment to school, two of the biggest protective factors is having, number one, a trusted adult in your life that you can talk to, and attachment to school. Those are two of the biggest, not risk factors, protective factors, is attachment to school and a trusted adult. Teachers skilled at regulating their emotions report less burnout and more positive affect while teaching. And lastly, school leaders with strong SEL competencies build and maintain positive and trusting relationship among members of the school community. Adult SEL is critical. So how can I better understand my emotions? I challenge you to take this personal self-reflection. This is in your tiny URL. I did this the other day with a school, and what I did was have them answer each of these questions individually. And it takes maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to go through each of the questions and really be thoughtful about them, to answer them and stuff like that. Then I put them in partners and I said, pick one strength and one area that you can improve on to share with your partner. So they started in partners and again, shared what they wanted to share. There may be some things on there that you don't want to share, and that's okay. All right. But I challenge you to do this, and again, if this is something, the PD that you want to be done in your schools, please contact me, because I'd be happy to come and help you do personal self-reflection, just to find out, how do I deal with my emotions? Where are my strengths and where are some areas that I need to work on? So please take a look at that in your tiny URL. Benefits of SEL in school. Again, relationships provide the foundation for learning. Emotions affect how and what we learn. Social and emotional skills are taught or can be taught. Again, SEL has a positive impact on academic performance, health, relationships, and citizenship. SEL skills and dispositions are demanded by employers. Listen to employers. They have people interview one day and not show up the next. So again, these social emotional skills are important throughout their entire life. And then SEL provides a coordinating framework to overcome fragmentation of prevention and positive youth development programs, which the whole child model helps you do also. We don't want to see fragmentation. We want to see comprehensive programming. I am going to skip this video, but I will download this into the tiny URL. It's probably in last year's intro, which is in the tiny URL. But because we're running out of time, I'm going to skip the 5 competencies. Please take a moment, if you can, in your own time, to take a look at the video, because it really does talk about how these 5 competencies are so important in schools. Okay, all of our students want to be heard, but may not have the words or tools to listen and express themselves effectively. So what are some strategies that we can use? Start the day with a check-in. How are you feeling today? All right. This is something that a colleague of mine has in their office, and it's got a little picture frame on it. And so every day I go into her office and I put the little picture frame around the one that I feel like I'm feeling like today. So you could do something like that. Again, allow students to work with partners, teach students how to work in groups, nurture a culture of kindness. We seem to be lacking somewhat in that today. Practice lots of role playing. Kids like to role play. You always want to put them in the positive role as opposed to the negative role, if there is one. But role playing helps kids incorporate those skills into their school life and then hopefully outside of their school life. Build students' social emotional vocabulary. Make more space for reflective writing so kids can write down their thoughts if they don't want to share them with you or with others. You know, get them to start journaling so that they can recognize how they're feeling. And set up a calm down corner. I know that a lot of schools, if you don't have one in your classroom, I know a lot of elementary classrooms do, but if you're in secondary, you know, do you have someplace where kids can go and just kind of calm down for a period of time so they can come back and be in that frontal cortex as opposed to that amygdala. So again, here's just that, you know, this can be used for, and the Michigan model has a lot of this stuff and a lot of these emotions, you know, some of the basic emotions that we're born with. This is another one for secondary school. You know, here's your sad, mad, scared, joyful, powerful, peaceful. And you can see that, you know, the different emotions radiate out from there. So that might be used in your secondary classes to get kids to think how they feel. Games for social emotional learning, please. All of these are explained at this URL right here. So scavenger hunts, you know, again, you can do that virtually or in the classroom or in the school. Four corners, I kind of think of, we used to call it 7-Up. All the kids put their heads down and somebody picks them and then they try to figure out who picked them. It's that type of thing, I think. Or maybe that's Guess Who. Charades, Pictionary, Comedy Hour, where kids tell jokes, appropriate jokes, using Kahoot in the classroom. Rock, paper, scissors versus the teacher. Show and tell, you know, we used to love that as kids. Student teacher, where the student actually teaches the teacher in the class something. Invite a guest. And then use emojis in the chat. And since we're 10 to 4 here, so we're almost over, if you would, just put an emoji in the chat if you can real quick. Oh, Becky says, my principal uses this wheel at our staff meetings. Good. All right. Oh, good. Good. I'm seeing smiles, smiles, smiles. Good. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Read alouds are another way. Again, that you can bring social emotional skills into the classroom. Because you talk about it, it builds empathy. You can have discussions on perspective, problem solving, decision making. And they also model and encourage appreciating diversity. So again, depending on the books but there's lots of books that are out now on social emotional, on various emotions. You can, you know, get books on just anger and books on, you know, love and all of the other ones and so on and so forth. So again, make sure that you've got a broad array of books to read. Next, check in with your students. All right. Our students, like the rest of us, are facing uncertain times. They're coping with major changes. All right, potentially sick family members or friends, and the emotional roller coaster that comes with a world crisis. It can look a variety of ways. All right, and again, it's just a great way to check in on your students. Nonverbal, show you how they're feeling on their hands, 1 through 5. You know, just like I did with you today at the beginning. Ask students, again, this is usually more for elementary school, but if they were the weather, what would they be today? Drop an emoji in the comments like you guys just did. Or a color check-in, assign different meanings to different colors. And then the kids hold up the way that they're feeling by the color that they hold up. Mindful breathing. Again, this is a nice way for you to get your kids back on task, after, to start a lesson or take a brain break or whatever. And again, you can look up each one of those different types of breathing techniques, belly breathing, deep swear, just they've got videos on all of them on YouTube. So if you want to use a video to show your kids how to bubble breathe or belly breathe or something like that, you can utilize those. And then practice gratitude. And these are a bunch of questions that you can ask your kids, to reflect on at the end of the day. What's one thing that you learned today, or one thing that you're thankful for today, or 3 things? What are 5 positive things about yourself? So you can use all of these questions to practice gratitude. And I know that brings, I do my 3 gratitudes in the morning, and it just, it kind of brings a different perspective. So practice gratitude. All right, share in the chat, if you would please, anything that you do in your classroom now to reinforce social emotional skills. So this is something that you're currently doing. All right. Do you have a curriculum to teach your social emotional skills? Identify, the second one you can tell me if you want to, but identify one SEL strategy that you can incorporate into your day that we talked about. So in the chat, if you would please. Zones of regulations to elementary kids. Kristen, can you unmute and explain that a little bit more?
Well, I go into the first grade classrooms, and I explain the different colors, like red is angry, blue is kind of sad, yellow is something you're excited about something, and green is that you're ready to learn. And so we spend several days looking at each color, what they feel like. And then the teachers, I make them a zones of regulation board. And then the kids, when they walk in, they check in. So the teacher can do a quick scan to see how each kid is feeling. And then when whoever's in the red or whatever, they can address them right away to hopefully make them have a great day, to kind of turn it around.
Thank you. So it's a quick way for teachers to check in on how the kids are that day.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, and they try to do it at the beginning of the day and then after lunch as well, because the little ones have some kinds of issues on the playground, and they keep that all the way through the afternoon.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And then Allison says lots of check-ins, student surveys, again, those interest surveys, and greeting kids by their names each day. Great. So the reason I wanted you to do this in the chat is because I just want you thinking about the things that you already do that promote social emotional learning, because you're doing things already within the classroom. And like I said, I would spend the first week, maybe first 2 weeks, just on social emotional skills so that you've got a good setup for your classroom for the remaining of the year. And then the last thing that I want to do just before we end here is I want to do a compassion exercise. So compassion is having the ability to understand another's emotions and the desire to alleviate their suffering, and makes us feel connected. It gives us purpose and grounds us in our individual and collective power to transform our experiences as human beings. And then in such a stressful profession like teaching, it can often be isolating, and learning to tap into compassion is vital to keep us engaged in our large school and global community. So here's the compassion exercise. Turn off your cameras. Make sure that you're on mute and get comfortable. Close your eyes or focus on a point that you'd like to focus on. Take a few deep breaths. Relax your body from head to toe. And repeat after me. And you can do this out loud or in your heads. It doesn't matter to me. But repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is seeking some happiness for their life. Again, just like me, this person is seeking some happiness in their life. Repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is trying to avoid suffering in their life. Just like me, this person is trying to avoid suffering in their life. Repeat to yourself, just like me, this person has known sadness, loneliness, and despair. Just like me, this person has known sadness, loneliness, and despair. Repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is seeking to fulfill their needs. Just like me, this person is seeking to fulfill their needs. And the last one, just like me, this person is learning about life. Just like me, this person is learning about life. And that's just a little kind of exercise that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed or something like that, or you're dealing with a student that has pressed your last button. And just remember that, you know, they're trying to fulfill their needs. They're trying to learn about life, and you're their instructor. So on that note, if kids come to us from strong, healthy, functioning families, it makes our job easier. If they do not come to us from strong, healthy, functioning families, it makes our job more important. And so on that note, here are some resources that are all linked in the PowerPoint, so you can just click on them. A Nation at Hope is in your tiny URL, as well as the personal SEL reflection. So make sure you check out that tiny URL because it does have a lot of resources in it. And I think we are just about out of time. And I want to thank you for participating, and thank you for staying and connecting, and have a wonderful beginning to your school year, and work on those social emotional skills. Reach out to me if there's anything else that you would like to talk about. So thank you, and have a great day.